we are members of European Union, so all the negative decisions of them are affecting us, but we still can have an independent position, and we can benefit from that, as it was described by the professor. So now what we're working on is to establish a reasonable, pragmatic cooperation with the Russians during war period and also for after war period. We have a very good strategic cooperation with the Chinese when the entire European continent was turning against them. We were also we remained pragmatic and reasonable and rational. So the economic cooperation is getting stronger, and we were very much in favor on the Donald Trump and the American Republican circles, and we share their vision that Europe shouldn't be liberal. Europe should be a community of independent member states who are working together. So their focus is on the member states, and in this description, Hungary can play a very important role, and I think we have a pretty good chance to make a deal with the new administration of the United States. And then we can say that there is a great power rivalry, and Hungary is a small country which was a loser of the 20th century, but we are able to establish proper positions to all directions with all the major powers. And that would mean, not just in 1 month's time or 1 year time, but in 10, 20, 30 years time, it would lead us into a position where we can say that relatively we also among the winners of the 21st century. This is our position. This is what we call and describe connectivity or economic neutrality. There are different, or Hungary first foreign policy. There are different expressions what we are using, but it reflects back on a very similar way of thinking.
Professor, in one of your recent books, in the Liberal Delusion one, you said that liberal foreign policy is something that only very rich states can, allow themselves to have, and only for a shorter period of time. And you were referring to the United States. Do you see like more realist turn in Europe, or this is something in your thinking that is inevitably coming?
I think that the principal reason that Europe has been able to pursue, or let me put it differently, European states have been able to pursue a liberal foreign policy, which I think is most clearly reflected in the European Union, was because of the presence of the American military in Europe. In other words, it was NATO that provided the underpinning of the European Union. And one of the reasons almost all European leaders I have met since the Cold War ended in 1989 have been deeply committed to keeping the Americans in Europe is because they understand that the United States is the pacifier. This is the American pacifier. To put it in slightly different terms, NATO is the pacifier. NATO underpins the European Union. The reason that the European Union is so tightly knit, and it is tightly knit, it's a remarkable institution, right? The reason it is able to reach that point of unity, the reason that we can talk about Europe. Just think about the use of that word Europe. We talk about Europe as if it were a single state. Of course, it's not, as you remind us. But we talk about Europe as if it's a single state. It's because of the European Union. But again, you never want to forget that underpinning the EU, underpinning Europe, is the American pacifier, NATO. Now you have to ask yourself, where is the Trump administration headed with regard to the American commitment to Europe? As you know, Trump has contempt for the Europeans. Trump does not like Europeans, the Hungarians notwithstanding. And Trump would like to greatly reduce the American military footprint in Europe. right? And I believe if Trump was free to act, he would put an end to the American commitment to NATO, right? And you also want to remember that the rise of China and the fact that China is a peer competitor creates the famous pivot to Asia. And you all know that if you pivot to someplace, you pivot away from another place. So pivoting to Asia means, in good part, pivoting from Europe. That has not happened yet because of the Ukraine war. But if that were to happen, if Trump gets his way and we greatly reduce the American commitment to Europe, the American footprint in Europe, and here we're talking about the military footprint, that will have significant consequences for the European